Also because reaching SDG, but we must our advocacy and outreach. Tell the stories for and about those who still need our help to accelerate action. Because I do not want to be here again in 2030, only if we are celebrating that we have finished the So let us unite in a moment of solidarity. Let us mobilize ourselves. Let us accept that everyone pushes. Let us not accept that anyone pushes back on the basic rights, especially sexual and reproductive health and rights. We can make change together with determination, strong commitments, and new innovative partnerships and alliances across sectors, organizations, states, and not at least youth. Our young generation of today want to carry the agenda forward and benefit from a new world order. A world where women and girls decide about their own body, their future, where they have access to quality education, to comprehensive sexuality education, so they can make informed choices. Where they engage equally and fully in all aspects of society, contribute to growing economics, to happier, healthier, and wealthier populations. The young people here at the summit are the voices and leaders of today, tomorrow, and the future. Let us not talk about them. Let them speak for themselves the coming days. Stand together in solidarity, but let us march together in solidarity with women and girls across the globe. Let's accelerate the promise of Cairo. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. May I invite to the podium His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, President of the Republic of Kenya.
Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Ministers, Your Excellency First Ladies, all our distinguished visitors and friends from across the globe. Karibuni Nairobi, Karibu Kenya, welcome Nairobi. Today, thousands gather here in Nairobi from over 100 countries, dozens of international organizations, over 200 civil society groups, and many leaders from private sector. I really do believe that the reason so many of us have convened in Nairobi is because we recognize that by advancing people's rights, their well-being, this is the prosperous and resilient societies. As many an African proverb has said, that women are the backbone of the family and indeed the bedrock of a nation. And because our women are the gatekeepers to family health they exert such a powerful influence on intergenerational outcomes for their children. Empowering women essentially empowers all our families. It empowers our societies. It empowers our nations, and it empowers the world. This was one of the essence of the first International Conference on Population Development that was held in Cairo in 1994. The conference highlighted the linkages between population, poverty reduction. It emphasized the value of investing in women and girls, both as an end in itself, but also as a key to improving the quality of life for everyone. Targets were set to reduce poverty and achieve sustainable development, increase access to education, achieve sexual and reproductive health, reduce infant and child mortality rates, reduce the maternal mortality rate, and also eliminate harmful gender practices. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to once again rededicate ourselves to the commitments made in Cairo. We have 5 years, and to make new commitments, the unfinished agenda. As we do so, let us bear in mind the fact that the most important participants in this summit are actually not in this conference. And you may be wondering who I am referring to. I am referring to the 1 in 5 women from all corners of the world that this year alone will experience gender-based violence, most likely from someone who is close to them. The 800 women and girls who die every day during pregnancy or childbirth, and the 4 million girls who every year have to endure the painful and traumatic effects of female genital mutilation. We are talking about the more than 33,000 girls who are married off every day before the age of 18, and the millions of unemployed youth with limited hope for their future. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let us deliberate over the next 3 days, and let our deliberations be guided by the needs, the aspirations, and the unrealized potential of those individuals who are not here. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no doubt that since the landmark agreement made in Cairo in 1994, there has been significant, though uneven, progress in many key areas. Today, nearly 1 billion fewer people are living in extreme poverty than in 1990, and life expectancy at birth has increased by about 7 years. Primary school education is accessible to most children in the world, and the global maternal mortality rate has fallen by about 45%. Fertility rates have also declined in most countries, meaning that couples have better control over, and there has been a steady, though slow, increase in the number of women in leadership and decision-making positions in all sectors of society. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenya joins other nations in celebrating the progress made since Cairo. We have achieved universal access to free primary and secondary education, and indeed this year, we achieved 100% transition from primary to secondary education. Further, we have achieved gender parity in both primary and secondary schools. I am happy to say that we have dramatically reduced child and infant mortality, and maternity services and health services for children below 1 year are free in all government health institutions. Reduction in maternal mortality has been steady but slower, has steadily decreased but at a slower pace, from 698 in 1994 to 362 per 100,000 live births today, while the contraceptive prevalence rate has doubled. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, our world has changed a lot since 1994 in the field of population and development. Inequalities have increased within and across countries, and there is greater demographic diversity. Some countries in the world are facing rapid population aging, while others prepare for the largest cohort of young people the world has ever seen. The world faces increased health threats, including threats from reproductive cancers such as breast, cervical, and prostate cancer. And there are also growing environmental pressures, including the urgent threat of climate change. This has made the commitments of Cairo more urgent and indeed more complex. To complete the unfinished agenda, therefore, requires us to develop new partnerships, mobilize political support, increase the level of international and domestic financing, and accelerate implementation of innovative and supportive interventions. Fortunately, there is a greater international commitment and cooperation to address these issues. The Sustainable Development Goals have provided a comprehensive international platform to systematically advance the Cairo Agenda. We also have more scientific and research evidence on what works and better technologies to guide and support policy. What then should we commit to as we go forward? I believe the packaging of priority actions will be for a century, and yet secondary education of the world, reduction in maternal deaths been much slower than projected in 1994. The death of a mother during pregnancy or while giving birth significantly reduces the chances of our children to survive and thrive. And yet, as we are demonstrating through Kenya's First Lady's Beyond Zero program, to emergency obstetric care. Further together agreed to eliminate female genital mutilation, which remains of human rights of women and girls. I would like to and that of the government of Kenya to providing the leadership necessary to ensure that this practice ends within this generation. In April this year, we signed a landmark declaration between the governments of Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Somalia, and Ethiopia to address cross-border FGM practice. And last week, we signed an agreement with religious and cultural elders from FGM. That we can a woman has a 1 in 3 chance of experiencing physical or sexual violence in her lifetime. This is a major gap in our development record as a global community. Since 1994, Kenya has enacted on the eradication of gender-based violence and harmful practices, which include the Prevention Act against Domestic Violence of 2015. Further, I believe that we can all commit to eliminate child marriages. The percentage of young women between 20 and 24 years of age who are married before their 18th birthday has declined from 34% in 1994 to 25% in 2019. But the absolute number of girls under 18 who are at risk of child marriages is estimated at 10.3 million in 2019. In Kenya, 23% of girls are married before their 18th birthday. Early marriages denies our girls a chance to achieve their full potential in education and limits their social economic contribution. I also believe that we can commit to accelerate women's equal participation and equitable representation at all levels of the political, public, and corporate sphere. In spite of a slight increase in women's participation in the workplace, there have been few gains in lifetime earnings and professional and technical leadership. And yet, global analysis suggests that advances in women's equality in the workplace would add an additional $1.2 trillion to global growth by 2025. Achieved through efforts and coalitions by governments, development partners, civil society organizations, private sector leaders, religious communities, women and youth organizations, and we need to sustain and expand these partnerships going forward. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we need to accelerate the promise of Cairo in order to build sustainable, vibrant, and inclusive societies. But if we fail to deliver on the Cairo promise, consigning our children to a less secure future than we inherited. I would at this moment like to thank the co-conveners of this summit, namely the Government of Denmark, the United Nations Population Fund, who have worked tirelessly, together with my government and other partners, to ensure that we have a program that is inspiring, that will be productive, and that will enable us to accelerate the promise. Let us march together for a purpose, and let us together deliver the promise to the future generations. And with that, I wish you all very, very fruitful deliberations and a wonderful, wonderful stay amongst the great people of Kenya. Asanteni sana. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President Uhuru Kenyatta, President of, and to our co-conveners for giving our opening remarks. I will now actually invite you, Your Excellencies, to please return to your seats so that we can continue with the program. And once again, incredible speakers earlier said, we don't want to be at the same place in the next 5 years. And I was just reflecting, hopefully ICPD 50 years from now, we'll be saying, look how far we've come.
And this is the time for us perhaps to imagine what the world would be like if indeed all those programs of action of ICPD25 were to be realized. May I ask you once again, ladies and gentlemen, to turn your eyes to the screen.
Imagine a world where no one is subjected to violence because of their gender, where no girl is forced to marry, where no girl or woman is subjected to female genital mutilation or other harmful practices. Imagine a world where every individual and couple, everywhere, can decide freely if and when to have children. A world where everyone has the information, education, and means to do so. Imagine a world where no woman or girl dies from preventable complications in pregnancy or childbirth, where no woman has to give birth without the help of a midwife, nurse, or doctor. Yet, imagining the world we want is not enough. It is time to be bold. It is time to be courageous. It is time to do what is right for women, girls, their families, and communities. We can no longer dream. It is time to act.
Imagine such a world. I'm really excited about our panel discussion today because I think it gives us a moment to talk about where we've come from and really where we ought to go. I'll now take this moment to introduce my panelists. We begin with Dr. Geeta Sen, who is the General Coordinator, Development Alternatives with Women for a New Era. We can applause while we introduce them. Next to her, we have Melinda Gates, co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. A round of applause. We have a male ally with us as well. We have Neil Fidel Lomibao. She decides 25 by 25 member and chairperson of the UN Youth Advisory Board, Philippines. And finally, Dr. Lina Abirafe, Executive Director of the Arab Institute for Women at the Lebanese American University. Dr. Geeta, I think we'll start with you because you can reflect on both moments, really. Having come from Cairo 25 years ago, having been there and being so influential in that original summit, and being here in Nairobi today, what would you say is the biggest accomplishment, but also the biggest bit of unfinished business?
Thank you.
It should be.
It's on?
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much for the question. And let me start by saying what my first memory of the pyramids was in Cairo when we reached there. The pyramids were on the Cairo skyline, and there they were, such a symbol of strength and endurance over millennia. Women have always been strong and enduring, and we knew when we went to Cairo as the women's rights organizations that we would need all of that strength and endurance. We were part of something momentous, world-changing, something to hand over to our daughters and our sons. And we knew that we were changing people's beliefs and norms. And that was one of the biggest accomplishments in a world where the powerful patriarchies of millennia had kept women and girls subordinate for far too long. I think that we changed how the world thinks about maternal death and ill health, about child marriage, very importantly, about violence against women in those conferences of the 90s, about the potential of young girls and women. And I think that that was our biggest accomplishment. But there's unfinished business. And that unfinished business, in a word, is about the realization of the human rights of girls and women. And that unfinished business has to do with the sexual and reproductive health and rights of adolescents and young people, women's rights to bodily autonomy and integrity, including the right to safe abortion when needed, the right to be free of abuse, of violence in so many of the places and spaces where we live, the quality of services that we expect from our governments and agencies, the sexual rights of all people as human rights, the rights of refugees and migrants, of people with disabilities, and those marginalized on the basis of poverty, of race or ethnicity, of caste or religion. What do we want? We want the recognition and funding and support to women's rights organizations, those same women's rights organizations that made Cairo happen. So that women and girls can not only speak truth to power, but can transform power. More power to us, and more power to the marching adolescents and young people of today and tomorrow.
Thank you for that. It's really about the power of inclusion at this point and financing. Neil, I'll cross over to you because this is now the post-Cairo era is where you come in. What about your life growing up in the Philippines motivated you to want to be a part of this? I had a few minutes to speak to you earlier. You are a self-proclaimed feminist and you really believe in the advancement of women and girls. What is it that motivated you? Can you hear me? No.
Hello? Hello? Okay. Thank you for that question. In reality, I was born in the year 1994, wherein the Cairo conference was held in, the ICPD was held in Cairo. And for the past 25 years, I've seen that what is the real implementation and the effect of ICPD, not just in my country, but around the world. Growing up, I had the privilege of growing up around women. My grandmother raised me together with my aunts because both of my parents needs to work to the capital city so that I could still live in the province. However, despite the development of my country, we're one of the fastest economies in the world. Philippines is still a very conservative country. I was enrolled in a Catholic school, and I am exposed to a very conservative community. In fact, I was already solving algebra during grade 6, and yet I believe for all of my life during that time that a baby goes out from the navel and not from the vagina. I just realized that it is not true because I failed my exam in school. 3 months ago, I went around the Philippines. I conducted my She Decides open mic that served as a national consultation in preparation for the ICPD. There's this one shocking report that I gathered. There's this young mom. She's 9 years old. And she was an unrecorded mom. And they just found it out when she was 10 because she got recorded at the age of 10 because she's having her second child. Can you imagine yourself, carrying your own baby when you were 9? Or second baby when you were 10? And honestly, before I come here in Nairobi, my friend died because of an AIDS-related infection. These are just a few stories that I always encounter every day. In every day of my life, Sometimes it made me realize that I should not turn a blind eye on this because in reality, people are dying, right? People are dying. And since I started in the sexual reproductive health and rights advocacy through the UNFPA Philippines when I was 15, I was 10 years ago, it made me think that these realities are actually the reasons why I wake up every day to fight for a better world. Because the ICPD changed a lot, but it didn't change enough. Thank you.
Wow. I think what really stands out is that passion, and I feel like we need that, especially with young people for whom we're leaving a lot of this to. Melinda, you have worked on family planning issues for quite a long time. How would you describe the current state of affairs with regards to providing these tools for women, getting the family planning tools to them, and where are we now?
Yes, so I think it's important to go back a little bit to ICPD from 1994 and to think about where we were as a world. As you said, we finally put women's rights at the center of this agenda. And yet we have to say to ourselves, where are we today? If you think about equality around the world, it is as old, inequality, it's as old as history. It's embedded in our societies, in our politics, in our economics, in our homes. And so if we're gonna tackle inequality, we have to look at these issues for women and girls. As was said earlier, they are the heart of our families. They are the bedrock of our societies, and they make everything better for men and boys and everyone around them. So in 2012, a coalition came together called FP2020, Family Planning 2020, to pick up the agenda that had been set in 1994 by the ICPD and to say, how do we resource that agenda and how do we move forward more quickly on contraceptives? Because there are many issues that affect women and girls, but contraceptives are one of the most powerful tools we have to put the power in the hands of young girls and women to plan their families and, quite honestly, to plan their future. So as the FP 2020 community knows, we have 53 million new women and girls on contraceptives since 2012. That is 30% more users of contraceptives than we would have had without that coalition coming together. And it means this last year alone, we averted 134,000 women dying in pregnancy or childbirth. Those are women who are alive to be there for their families. Now, we missed our goal, and we have to be honest about that. FP 2020 sent a goal of 120 million by 2020. We didn't achieve that, but what we built is phenomenal. And what we can do between now and 2030 to gain universal coverage of contraceptives is completely and totally achievable.
Okay. Thank you. You know, Lena, we've even heard some of those who've made opening remarks talk about needing to protect and to fight for why we're here, for women and girls. So how do we protect our rights? How do we fight for our rights in a space where sometimes having these conversations faces pushback? How do we continue to fight for our core issues and advance those?
We need to strengthen our women's movement. You know, a movement implies that there are people that are willing to move and move in the same direction. And I feel like we need to have a louder voice. We need to move the movable middle, not just speak to each other. We do that very well and far too often, I think. We need to look at those that are not among our ranks and bring them in. We need to look at the indigenous movements and build on those and scale those and look at what our non-negotiables are. Do we have a clear ask? Do we know what we want? And do we know where we're going? I think where we are.
Eliminate all preventable maternal and child mortality and morbidities, to eradicate gender-based violence against women, girls and youth, and to eliminate the unmet need for family planning that constrains the rights and the well-beings of millions of women and young people and limits their potential. 3, to support investments in the capabilities of adolescents and youth that uphold their rights and create the necessary conditions through which they can fulfill their potential by guaranteeing access to quality education and appropriate skills at every level, including access to comprehensive sexuality education and youth-friendly services that ensure their health and empowerment as a necessary precondition for the realization of the demographic dividend upon which the inclusive economic growth and sustainability of much of the world depends. 4, to support national governments in the full and accelerated implementation of the IPCD agenda in line with national implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals by leveraging synergies across the UN system, including through enhanced alignment and coordination in the work of the UN country teams and as a result of the UN reform process. 5, to ensure that no one is left behind and that we reach the furthest behind first through the timely and coordinated production and dissemination of disaggregated data to further support national governments in the elaboration of data-driven policies, strategies and programs geared toward the fulfillment of the ICPD agenda as a critical contribution to the 2030 agenda and the SDGs. And 6, to incorporate the outcomes of the Nairobi Summit as an integral part of the decade of action to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you, and happy to hand over to Dr. Natalia Kanem, Executive Director of UNFPA.
We, the UNFPA management and staff, reaffirm and renew our commitment to the full ICPD program of action during this 25th anniversary year. We strive for a world where sexual and reproductive health and rights are fulfilled without discrimination, reaching the most vulnerable in the most complex situations. We recognize that the ICPD Program of Action is unfinished business. In the spirit of the Decade of Action and Delivery to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals in Agenda 2030, we commit to intensify our efforts and investments to lead global efforts to achieve 3 transformative goals. First, 0 preventable maternal deaths. Second, 0 unmet need for modern contraceptives. And third, 0 violence against women, including child marriage and female.
The human beings have been here for 4.5 million years. That is since they came from monkeys. You remember there were monkeys before? And 4.5 million years ago, they started being human beings slowly. Most of that time, this gender inequality has been there. That's what Melinda Gates also pointed out. So therefore, as I'm coming to march with you, I want to point out that you cannot achieve this equality if the society does not change itself. You cannot keep a pre-capitalist society in existence and you think you will achieve easily these goals. You are not going to keep your Turkana as Turkana and your Pokots, the other side, I know, I live with them, I know what they do. And your Masais, keep them traditional, but also achieve these aims. That's why I would feel more comfortable to add to our literature here the words socio-economic transformation of the whole society. You cannot keep a traditional society and then you make it achieve middle-class goals, because these are essentially middle-class goals. Even Europe was like this, was like gender inequality and so on. It is in the last few centuries when the middle-class values have been achieved, even in Europe. The votes in the UK did not vote until 1911. Before that, the women were not voting. So, can we add to our literature, the literature of this conference, the words socio-economic transformation? So, I put, what I put here, marching for gender equality in a socio-economically transformed society. I wanted to add that. His Excellency Kenyatta it because he talked of creation and development. If you don't create jobs for the population, how will you ensure equality of anybody, including the women? If people have no jobs, they are vulnerable and exploited. You can legislate, but the legislation will not be implemented because there is a lot of problems in the society. Number 3, so that means we must transform society here, especially here in Africa, by modernizing it. Now, finally, on the 4 points, I had the slogan, which I support, the girls own their bodies. I totally agree that my daughters and my granddaughters own their bodies. Remember, I'm here as a veteran. I am a veteran husband, veteran father, veteran grandfather. I have been through all of it. That's why I'm veteran. I am also a veteran freedom fighter. But the question is, when you own something, don't you sometimes get consultants to help you own your property better? I have had people hiring consultants to advise them on their businesses. The business is yours, but you hire consultants. Now, who are the consultants?
And unwavering support to member states, including Antigua and Barbuda, for the past 50 years. The Cairo Program of Action boldly asserts that sustainable development can only be achieved if we accelerate efforts to ensure access to quality education and healthcare, universal access to sexual and reproductive health, and the overall empowerment of women and girls. It is for this reason why the government of Antigua and Barbuda is committed to achieve universal access to sexual and reproductive health as part of the universal health coverage by ensuring access for all adolescents, youth, and in particular, girls. In fact, we have seen a significant reduction in the maternal mortality rate. We have had one within the last 5 years, making Antigua and Barbuda's maternal mortality rate among the lowest in the developing world. We have also achieved the elimination of HIV mother-to-child transmission. So clearly, our policies are working. Addressing gender-based violence, and in particular, violence against women, are key priorities of the government of Antigua and Barbuda. We have implemented a one-stop center for care and support to survivors of gender-based violence and a model sexual offenses court in Antigua and Barbuda. We have introduced and adopted strong legal and legislative frameworks, and in so doing, we are committed to achieving zero sexual and gender-based violence, zero harmful practices, and elimination of all forms of discrimination against all women and girls. Our government recently introduced a draft National Integrated Social Protection Policy to ensure the basic social, employment, health, and reproductive needs of the population are met. The policy will ensure that social protection programs are accessible to vulnerable populations within Antigua and Barbuda. Our government is also in the process of drafting a national gender equality policy that will guarantee that the unique needs of women, men, and children and vulnerable populations are taken into account, and to do so, to make sure that they're part of the national planning process and decision-making. As a small state with very limited resources, we are also prepared to mobilize the required financing to finish the ICPD program of action and to sustain the gains that we have made so far. Antigua and Barbuda understands and values the importance of demographic diversity to drive economic growth and sustainable development. The government commits to investing in the education and employment opportunities for all, especially for girls and youth, and I'm proud to announce that Antigua and Barbuda recently established the 4th landed campus of the University of the West Indies in order to enlarge the prospects of all, especially our women and our girls. The government of Antigua and Barbuda is committed to ensuring the basic humanitarian needs and rights of affected populations, especially that of girls and women, are addressed as critical components of responses to humanitarian and environmental crises, as well as fragile and post-crisis reconstruction. Our government is currently implementing strategies to prevent and mitigate both the adverse impact of human activities on the environment and the effects of climate change, disasters, and environmental changes through the Green Climate and Adaptation Fund project initiatives. In closing, the government of Antigua and Barbuda reaffirms its commitment to the ICPD of 1994, the 2030 Agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the Nairobi Statement on ICPD25. Recognizing that implementation is essential for the reduction of poverty, social and economic inequality, and the protection of women and girls. By so doing, we will ensure that no one is left behind as we stand in solidarity in empowering our females and girls. I thank you.
Her Excellency Epsi Campbell Barr, First Vice President of the Republic of Costa Rica.
Good afternoon. I'm here representing Costa Rica because we are committed with the ICP agenda and Montevideo consensus, and also because we have to finish the unworked work, because we want also to share with you our commitments of San Jose. That is an agenda to accelerate the fulfillment of rights of people of African descent in Latin America and in the Caribbean. We, as people of African descent, are more than 200 million of people in the continent and in the Caribbean. We want to reinforce the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, one of the biggest challenges faced to eradicating poverty and advancing sustainable development, so the people of African descent must be considered in their 17 objectives and 169 goals. To increase, we are committed to increase and to achieve the progress in the region to guarantee the protecting the rights and dignity of the people of African descent in their diversity for full enjoyment of their economic, social, cultural, civil, political, and environmental rights, and therefore overcome structural inequalities within the framework promote possible constitutional reforms to recognize the historical presence of people of African descent, develop the necessary laws and racial discrimination, and guarantee access to justice and the application on justice with no discrimination. We are committed to provide effective protection of the rights of people of African descent, making visible the externality and vulnerabilities affecting them, reinforcing the application of affirmative action measures and well as policy aimed at eradication racism and racial discrimination, to ensuring the necessary institutional mechanism in areas of human rights to guarantee an effective exercise of human rights, equality, and non-discrimination. We are committed to promote and strengthen national and local plan to measure the promote of inclusion of people of African descent, as well action related to the Agenda 2030 and Montevideo Consensus, in which should be considered the particular demographic and social cultural dynamic of African descent peoples and communities. And because of that, we call the United Nations system, an international and regional organization, and civil society, the private sector, and any other stakeholders to full commit and intensify the efforts in the fight against racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. We welcome the work of the United Nations Fund to accelerate global action to fulfill of the rights of people of African descent and congratulate the commitments to make visible and position the rights of our people here in this Nairobi Summit. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those remarks. And now, to please welcome Her Excellency Jewel Siane Howard-Taylor, Vice President of the Republic of Liberia.
The ICPD-POA emphasized the numerous linkages between population and development, focusing on empowering women and girls and providing them with more choices through expanded access to education, healthcare, development, and employment, amongst others. These rights have now been expanded to include the right to universal healthcare coverage, access to sexual and reproductive health rights, ensuring that mutilation. I'm glad to report that Liberia has been working to uphold its commitment. Our partners and our government have done a lot over the last 25 years in lifting these important issues. In 2014, 20 years after the adoption of the ICPD-POA, Liberia conducted its national review process under the theme ICPD Beyond 2014. We launched our process looking at the next 10 years, and we reviewed the extent to which Liberia had fulfilled its commitment, thereby ensuring that no one is left behind. Therefore, as we climax the plan of action of the ICPD here in Nairobi, the government of Liberia remains committed to ensuring zero unmet need for family planning information and services, universal availability of quality, affordable, and safe contraceptives by 2030, and to uphold all of the 12 global commitments under the Nairobi Statement. As Liberia and other nations continue to work to accelerate the promise, let us each be reminded that there is an urgent need to accelerate critical reforms which go beyond the health sector. We need to change negative social norms, laws, and policies which uphold human rights, the most important being gender equality. I hereby submit on behalf of our government full commitment to the ICPD-POA here in Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you.
Her Excellency Dr. Hala Mustafa El Said Zayed, Minister of Health and Population, the Arab Republic of Egypt.
فخامة الرئيس أوهورو كينياتا رئيس جمهورية كينيا، السيدة أمينة محمد نائب السكرتير العام للأمم المتحدة، السيدة الدكتورة ناتاليا كامن المدير التنفيذي لصندوق الأمم المتحدة للسكان، أصحاب الفخامة والمعالي السيدات والسادة، أتقدم بخالص الشكر لجمهورية كينيا قيادة وحكومة وشعباً على استضافة هذا الاجتماع وعلى حفاوة استقبال الوفود المشاركة. إن العمل الدولي في مجال قضايا السكان وعلاقتها بالتنمية لا يعد محورياً فقط لارتباطه بصياغة مستقبل المجتمع البشري، بل أيضاً لتأثيره العميق على التعاون الدولي في الموضوعات الاقتصادية والاجتماعية، خاصة مع اتصاله بقضايا مكافحة الفقر وتحقيق التنمية والحفاظ على البيئة والصحة العامة وتعزيز حقوق المرأة وتمكينها وتدفقات الهجرة واللجوء وغيرها من الشؤون المرتبطة بحاضر ومستقبل شعوبنا. وقد حرصت مصر سواء من واقع مسؤولياتها كراعي ومستضيف لمؤتمر القاهرة للسكان والتنمية لعام 1994 أو من منطلق دورها الرائد على المستويين الإقليمي والمتعدد الأطراف في تناول الأبعاد المتشابكة للمسائل السكانية، على أن يكتسب برنامج عمل القاهرة الإرادة السياسية اللازمة لتنفيذ ما جاء فيه من مقررات هامة، مع الأخذ بعين الاعتبار أن هذا البرنامج يمثل توازناً دقيقاً للمناقشات الثرية التي جرت خلال هذا المؤتمر والتي شهدت تناول بعض المفاهيم غير المتوافق عليها. ومع إيماننا بأن العالم قد شهد تطورات هامة للنهوض بالتنمية البشرية وبخاصة في شقها الاجتماعي مثل أجندة التنمية المستدامة 2030، إلا أن لدينا في ذات الوقت قناعة راسخة بضرورة الحفاظ على التوازن الذي مثله برنامج عمل القاهرة، والذي سيظل في تقديرنا الوثيقة الأكثر شمولاً التي تحظى بالتوافق الأكبر بين أطراف العمل الدولي في هذا المجال الحيوي. لذا تنظر مصر إلى هذا الاجتماع باعتباره محفلاً هاماً للحوار حول قضايا السكان والتنمية، وليس لإقرار مفاهيم أو أطر عمل جديدة. ومن هنا فإن السعي لإعادة التفاوض حول بعض المفاهيم التي تضمنها برنامج القاهرة لن يؤدي سوى لفتح المجال أمام ظهور تباينات وتجاذبات جديدة بين أطراف العمل الدولي، وهو ما لا نرى بالتأكيد فائدته، خاصة وأن رغم الإنجازات التي تحققت على المستويات الوطنية والإقليمية والدولية في تنفيذ برنامج القاهرة، إلا أن تحديات عديدة تواجه تنفيذ الأهداف الطموحة التي تضمنها هذا البرنامج، وهو ما يتطلب تكاتف الجهود ووحدة المنطلقات، وذلك في ظل تعدد المفاهيم الثقافية والقيم الحضارية والدينية. السيدات والسادة، لقد استندت رؤية مصر دائماً لموضوعات الصحة والسكان على أسس ثلاث. الأول يكمن مقياس النجاح في القضية السكانية في تناولها وفق منظور متكامل يؤكد الارتباط الوثيق بين السياسات السكانية وبين عملية التنمية بكافة أبعادها الاقتصادية والاجتماعية، وهو ما نصت عليه قرارات الأمم المتحدة.
to this session, knowing that one out of those three could literally be anybody. In order to tell us a little bit more about the announcement that Natalia made, that one of the 16 days of action will be against femicide, I want to just invite Krishanti from the Center for Women's Global Leadership to say a few words. Krishanti.
Globally, of recorded cases of homicide of women last year, 58% were committed by intimate partners and family members. This means that the most dangerous place for a woman is her home. The Center for Women's Global Leadership, the founder and the coordinator of the 16 Days of Activism to End Gender-Based Violence campaign, implemented by 6,000 plus organizations in over 185 countries, dedicate Friday, December 6, 2019. It is also the anniversary of the Montreal Massacre, as a day of remembrance, a day of action and accountability, committed to addressing femicide. Please join us. Together, a world without violence is possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Krishanti. The next part of this session is going to be in 3 segments. We're going to have a first segment which is going to look at the evidence, a second segment where we will have panelists looking at interventions and what more needs to be done, and then a final segment that I will keep as a little bit of a surprise for you right now. We all know, at least since the Vienna Conference on Human Rights in 1993, that violence against women is a violation of women's human rights. But we're learning since then more and more about its pervasiveness and insidiousness, how it creeps into and leaps out of homes, communities, workplaces, the street, literally everywhere. That it's a form of disciplining women and girls and controlling them. At the same time, we've been getting more and more evidence about its economic and societal impacts. 26 years after Vienna and 25 years after Cairo, what do we know about violence against women and girls? What's the evidence? To lead us into this discussion, we have 2 speakers who need relatively little introduction, so I'm going to give them very brief introductions. Phumzile Mlambo Nguka, Under-Secretary General and Executive Director of UN Women. Since 2013, Phumzile has led UN Women And before she came to UN Women, she was an activist in South Africa against apartheid and was involved in South Africa's successful integration of women's rights into its new post-apartheid constitution. Our second panelist is Quentin Woden, who's a lead economist at the World Bank. Quentin has worked in Africa and Latin America and is a true Renaissance man. He's the only one I know, male or female, who has 4 PhDs in economics, in environmental sciences, in health sciences, and in theology and religious studies. So Quentin isn't just a boring economist, and I can say that because I'm one myself. So let's start with the panel conversation. So, Phumzile, ending all forms of violence against all women and girls is a key priority for your organization, UN Women. Can you tell us where we stand globally on this issue? What are the different manifestations and effects of violence against women and girls? And what's fueling these abuses?
Thank you very much for this session. Thank you, Natalia, for this excellent convening and for lifting our spirits in the way this morning's session did. Thank you, DSG, also for being here, and the member states and colleagues from civil society who are here. Let me just start by telling you something that struck me. One of the colleagues was just telling me that in preparing for the Beijing 25, in her country, they were asking the women, what is it that they really want to see change fundamentally in the country? The women indicated 3 things. We want income security, we want access to care services and related public services, and we don't want to live in fear, and we don't want violence in our lives. And if you do the 2, the 3rd would go away. So in whatever we do on the work of ending violence against women, it is very clear that the denial of income security to women, the deprivation of services, fuels a situation where women become dependent and tied up to situations where violence becomes normalized. We also have seen norms and stereotypes that are entrenched in many of our societies, also fueling violence against women to the extent that women themselves actually expect that being violent towards them is just a way of life. Where society does not stand up enough and object to this violence and show zero tolerance, women and society become immune to this injustice. But also, men become perpetrators who don't have to suffer any consequence for that behavior, and they become repeat offenders. There is a suggestion that we are not living in a world where a large number of men are perpetrators, but a significant number of men are repeat perpetrators, and they do it because they can, because there just isn't enough interventions and consequences for this bad behavior. And if I just can end by saying, one of the critical areas where we have some control as society is making sure that our institutions work. Because the institutions that in some ways exist to fight, to prevent, to protect women are the ones that are failing women in a significant way. And we have a list of what can be done in these institutions, and we have seen it work elsewhere. And it would be good that we keep that in mind, that this is not a battle we cannot win.
So, three things I take from what you said. One is it's not just the perpetration of violence, it's the fear of violence, that women and girls live in fear all their lives. The second very important one was the role of economic dependence. When girls and women are dependent, then a culture of perpetration, impunity grows. And building from that, Quentin, I want to ask you, the World Bank has conducted a number of studies on the economic analysis of gender-based violence, including child marriage. Can you tell us a little bit about what you found there, and do you have evidence about the role of economic dependence in the perpetration and continuation of violence against girls and women?
Thank you. Can you hear? Yes. So indeed, we were asked a few years ago to estimate the economic impact of child marriage. And the reason is that child marriage was still seen mostly as a social issue and not as an economic issue. And the hope was that by computing the cost of child marriage, we would be able to have a stronger dialogue with governments in order to really put resources towards ending the practice. So the study was done with RCRW. We got funding from 2 foundations. Now, what did we find? We were trying to first look at the impacts in 5 areas. And we had a few surprising findings, actually. The first area was about fertility and population growth. And the basic finding is obvious enough. If you marry below the age of 18, you are going to have children earlier, and you are going to have more children over your lifetime. But the impact of child marriage on fertility rates was very high. And in the 20 countries or so where we looked at that impact, if you end child marriage, you would reduce fertility rates by about 10%. Actually, if you get all the girls to complete education, which probably would almost end child marriage, you would reduce fertility rates in those countries by 1/3, very large effect. That in turn has a large impact on population growth, and therefore would lead to much higher standards of living. I mean, GDP per capita, if you want, or other measures. And so the largest economic impact of child marriage is through its impact on fertility and population growth. The second largest is education. And of course, if you marry early, it's very difficult to remain in school. So child marriage leads to girls dropping out. The reverse is true too. If the girls manage to stay in school, that reduces the risk of child marriage. But this has then a large impact on future earnings in adulthood. And I won't give you all the numbers, but this was the second largest impact after the impact on fertility from an economic point of view. The third largest impact was about child health. Child marriage is actually responsible for 3/4 of the cases of early childbearing, which is a woman has her first child before the age of 18. And early childbearing leads to much higher rates of under-5 malnutrition and under-5 mortality, and that in turn again has large costs. Where we didn't find as large impacts as we thought we would was about the impact of child marriage on decision-making for women in the household, the impact of child marriage on intimate partner violence. Those impacts are there, but simply ending child marriage is not going to solve those issues. It will help a little bit, but not dramatically. Now, before coming to the question of dependency, and I know that this is the question for the next part of this panel, what do we need to do? Well, it seems to me that the most important investment to end child marriage is to keep the girls in school. That's a viable alternative to an early marriage. Now, this comes from analysis of very different types of data, but then what do you need to do to keep the girls in schools? You may need to change social norms, you need to have schools, they need to be affordable, and very importantly, you need to improve the quality of the learning in school, because the fact that girls and boys don't leads many of them to drop out. The last point on dependency, so we didn't look actually in details at the impact of dependency, economic dependency on child marriage, although it's very clear that the rates of child marriage are much higher among the poorer segments of the population. What is, though, clear also is that because child marriage affects education and therefore earnings in adulthood, child marriage then leads to issues of economic dependency, if you will, later on.
It's very interesting, Quentin, that in those studies about child marriage, you found strong relationships to reduced fertility, improved education, better child health, but that, in fact, a reduction in child marriage doesn't seem to do quite so much to reduce interpartner violence. And that, I think, is a very important lesson for us to keep in mind, that while we might child marriage is a violation and a form of violence in itself, but reducing that form of violence is not automatically or naturally going to reduce interpartner violence between married adults or young people by quite so much. And that's a very important thing, because it means that in terms of interventions and policies, and this is something we need to think about very carefully, we need to tackle the problem of interpartner violence in itself and not imagine it will go away by doing other things. I wonder, Phumzile, if you want at this stage to comment on that. And I think you have a call to action that you wanted to speak to us about.
As you know that we are linking ICPD with the Beijing +25, we see the two as mutually reinforcing, because they are. If you like, the 1990s were somehow the golden era of fueling women's rights. And in the best scenario, things would have become better and better and better. We did make progress, but we didn't make progress that is enough for us to be in a position where violence against women is not a concern. The call to action for us, to you from us, in line with also supporting the 3 zeros that the ICPD in Nairobi is calling for, is also to drive the violence against women to zero. We are asking for systematic and coordinated efforts in all countries, something that governments have control over. You can bring your prosecution, your police, your social institutions, and work with civil society in a concerted and a coordinated way. In the countries where we've done this, we have actually seen changes. But in addition, there must be sustained advocacy on changing norms and stereotypes against women, and work with men as well to take the responsibility to change behavior and norms. One thing that we achieved 25 years ago was to ensure that women's rights are accepted as human rights, and women grasped that with both hands, but the rest of society did not. So we actually have to change the whole ecosystem in order for us to be in concert with the rest of society. And part of our call of action is a much more active and stronger campaign to engage with society on the change of norms and stereotypes to support the coordinated efforts of all institutions to work together. And with the partnerships that we have with almost everybody who's here around the world and with the UNFPA, there's a strong possibility for us to deliver significant change, but this has to be a coordinated effort.
Thank you so much, Phumzile, for making, and I knew you would, the obvious and absolutely essential connection between ICPD25 and Beijing 25. Just as we did between ICPD and Beijing, we need to make that same connection 25 years later and to build on the synergies from one to the other, particularly in this very difficult area of intervention and action. I want to thank both of you, both our panelists. Please rise and please give them a hand. Thank you very much. Our second panel is going to be a conversation about the responses needed today and in the future. And we have 5 wonderful panelists with us, and I want to invite them up to the podium. Mr. Rasmus Prehn, the Minister of Development Cooperation of Denmark. Mr. Prehn is a member of the Social Democratic Party, and we've already heard from him, so you know how much passion he brings to the work that he does. Henriette Geiger, the Director for People and Peace in the Economic Commission's Development and Cooperation. Mr. Joris Jurians, I'm sorry if I'm mangling the name. It's probably Joris Jurians, the head of the Health and Aid Division in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands. Welcome. Dr. Nadine Gassman. Welcome, compañera. The president of the National Women's Institute of Mexico, who has a PhD in public health from the Johns Hopkins University. And last but not least, Mufida Haider, the gender integration specialist at the Arab Institute for Women in the Lebanese American University. Welcome. So let's cut to the chase here. Minister Prehn, what are the 2 main actions that your country is going to do or is doing right now to end violence against women and girls?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this panel. From the Danish side, we are very much concerned about the gender-based violence, and it's really on the top of our agenda. And we try to deal with it in 2 ways. So we deal with it on an international way, and then also on a more domestic or national way. What we have believed in for many years was if we could make development policy as we have done for ages, it would also help on violence. And as we just heard Christian Wudon said just before, we can have results if we have less poverty, more education, better health systems. But unfortunately, we can see, even though we have a welfare state as Denmark, where people are living in very good conditions with no poverty, free access to education, we still have gender-based violence. And therefore, we also have to work with other tools. And we have worked in Denmark for ages with dialogue and with psychology and with group-orientated works where we try to deal with norms. And as something new, we have introduced what we call a concept of violent love, where young people and young girls and young men can go and have counseling and have tools to deal with conflicts without violence. And we try to work with that in Denmark. And what we would like to do is also to introduce this kind of work on an international basis. And what I've seen throughout the world is, for instance, I was in Ethiopia, and we were supporting a safe house for young girls and women who have been abused or have been in some kind of violent situation. So support like that. And then I was in Jordan, and we visited an initiative by the Danish Refugee Council, dealing with aggressive and violent men, try to counseling with them and try to make them deal with their own problems. And it seems like it can help. So we have to work on many different ways on handling with violence, because we will not accept it. We should end violence.
Thank you so much. What you said, Minister, is so, complements so much what Quentin said in the previous panel, which is whatever else we may do to reduce poverty, to improve health, to improve education, this problem of violence needs to be tackled head-on and directly. It's not going to go away through sideways, roundabout tackling on itself. And I think that that's an extremely important lesson for us. I wonder, Henriette, from the European Commission's perspective, would you like to answer that question?
Yes, thank you very much. So, as the EU, we are, of course, working in close collaboration with our member states, such as Denmark and others. And at the EU level, we have two main tools at the moment. The first one is the GAP, the Gender Action Plan. That plan, it sounds very boring, but is actually a commitment of all the EU institutions and all its member states to mainstream gender equality in all development cooperation action. Every single project, every single thing we do, and we have a target of 85% of all our action across the EU has to have gender as a specific objective. This means that we are turning around the whole institutional culture of the EU regarding gender. So it's no longer, let's say, a tick-the-box exercise, but it's expected from every single person in the whole system, from minister to ambassador to gender focal point and others, to take this very seriously and, more importantly, to report back on the results. So this, together with action that we're taking inside the EU is going to be the powerful tool for turning around completely what the EU does globally. And the EU is the most important donor, so what we do is really changing and helping also others to make that shift. The second important tool is what Amina Mohamed already mentioned. It's our EU-UN Spotlight Action, Spotlight Initiative to end gender violence against women and girls. The EU has put 500 million euros in the UN to work to implement a global program in all the regions of the world to end gender-based violence. And in each region, it has a different focus. For example, in Latin America, it's femicide. Here in Africa, it's FGM. Then in Asia, it is the migrant worker. But what it should be is that it brings a very concrete action-based change and what we in each country and what we want to achieve globally is a point of no return. This is a historic opportunity. Thank you. Never before has so much money been put into ending gender-based violence. And we all have an obligation to get the results now. So this is an irreversible change that then can be sustained over time. So we have already the first very exciting results. We work differently. We have a theory of change, but in each country we adapt obviously to the needs. And we, for example, we have in Liberia, we have already a moratorium on female genital mutilation through a dialogue with the religious leaders. These are very concrete results, and in each country we're achieving that. So we very much hope that this will bring us to a completely new era. Thank you.
Joris, may I ask you to give us your answer to that question?
Thank you so much. In the Netherlands, ending violence against women and girls is a high priority on our political agenda, both in the national domestic context as in our international cooperation. Internationally, as it was mentioned, we talk 1 out of 3 women, which is almost 1 billion people, which is enormous. It's an epidemic, it's a plague. Also in my country, 14% of girls experience sexual acts or intercourse against their will. By the way, also 3% of the boys. We should look in a broad sense. Our response should be a combination of accessible support for victims and prevention. An example of accessible support for victims is our centers for victims of sexual violence, where basically psychosociological, medical care are given, but also our police forces are involved. That has as a big advantage that victims have to tell their story only once, which helps not to stigmatize them all over again at different occasions. In the field of prevention, obviously an important role is in education, in comprehensive sexuality education. This is a core objective one of the core objectives in our secondary education. It's compulsory in Dutch schools to teach about comprehensive sexuality education. You want to establish a change of culture. And for a change of culture, you need to involve young people. We have in our delegation an SRHR youth ambassador, Justine van der Beek. So in line with what you said this morning, Rasmus, let's not talk about young people, but let's let young people do the talking. I would like to allow Mrs. Chairperson Justine to say a few words on this.
Thank you. Big thanks to Joris for sharing his speaking time, and hopefully this can also be an example or an inspiration to other governments. I'm the Dutch Youth Ambassador for Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights, and I would like to ask your attention for the following numbers. 120 million girls worldwide in the ages between 15 and 19 years old have experienced sexual acts against their will. 120 million. I know too many of those girls in my home country, the Netherlands. As has been mentioned before, the people, mainly the people that commit this violence are current or former partners, male partners of these girls. I think this calls for a re-examination of our notion of masculinity. Boys, in fact, will not be boys. Boys will be what we show them. And we have the tools to eradicate this epidemic, to teach young people that they have the right to say yes and they have the right to say no. And we can do this through comprehensive sexuality education, evidence-based, inclusive education that fights these gender norms. And more importantly so, young people themselves can tell us the best way on how to do this. Nothing about us without us. We have the biggest youth world population at the moment, and we have acknowledged young people as right holders for a very long time. So it's our duty and our chance to redefine the rules of the game. This we owe to those 120 million girls. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Justine. And thank you, Joris, for that very direct and real experience of handing over to young people. All three have said a number of really important things, including no more box ticking on gender-based violence or even on gender equality. Real accountability to be built in when real money is being put in. And I think it's great to hear that, because I'm sure all of us have experience with the box ticking over many, many years. The importance of prevention, the role that comprehensive sexuality education can play in reducing violence and in changing norms of what is masculine, what is feminine, what is okay and not okay to do and be. And what is right and wrong and how we deal with that in our relationships. I think that that's very important. Changing culture and changing the nature of how we deal with each other. I think we've heard a number of things. I want to turn to you, Nadine. From a country which has experienced so many different forms of violence, and from where I first heard the term femicide, in fact, how does what they said about the nature of interventions resonate with you? And can you tell us what you see as challenges in moving forward?
Well, thank you very much for being here. It's very complicated to be so far away from the audience, so I was actually wanting to be like a young person, but I guess I need to keep sitting. As you said, Gita, the fact that in Mexico, as in all Latin America, the issue of the different kinds of violence is such a daily experience for women. And the fact that we need to really address the issue from the structural things, the actual determinants of violence that are in a way simple because it rests in the way society is organized, how patriarchy has shown what it is to be a woman and what's to be a man, and how the difference in power are so prevalent. When we think about how to end violence, we have all to agree that we need to prevent. And the big issue is how we work in society to put forward the very simple issue that we're equal, that in reality what we need to build is equality in action, equality in every sense. So education, media, the way we teach children how to behave towards one another is so important. And what we're doing in terms of what are the actions is to really take a comprehensive approach. We are in a very interesting process of government change in the way we govern and the way we look into the problems, where inequality in all its spheres is central to public policy. So, of course, gender inequality is also central, as is social, economic, etc. So we are challenged by the culture, we are challenged by a society that is very macho, that's very Mexican terms, we are challenged by the intimate partner violence, the social violence, and all kinds of violence that go from psychological to feminicide, which in Mexico is taking an important toll, as in other places in society.
Minister Prin, I understand that you have an engagement for which you have to leave. Let me ask you a quick 30-second response to the question. If you could change one thing tomorrow that would make a difference on this issue, what would it be?
It's a very difficult question. And then with such a short time. To be honest, I think actually the best thing to do is to continue working on international basis to have a more healthier world and to put girls and women in the center. That's really the most important things to do.
Thank you so much. Let's give the minister a big hand. Mufida, I'm going to come back to you with that same question. How does what was said by the earlier panelists resonate with you in the context in which you live and work? And what challenges do you see in moving forward?
Yes, where do I begin? To start with, we know that many of the Arab countries were ranked the lowest in the Global Gender Gap Report 2018, and Lebanon is one of them. However, women and girls in the Arab region face a lot of challenges, from low political participation to intimate partner violence to child marriage to criminalizing abortion without any access to sexual and reproductive health education. So. And with the constrained freedom of choice, which I consider is the most important thing when it comes to our rights. And I think that this all goes to the patriarchal system and to several reasons, but especially to the existing discriminatory laws that exist in the countries, to sectarianism, and to lack of funding, and especially I think there isn't enough will for change in politicians and government, and this keeps things ahead of time. But what I would like to actually point something out, that despite all of these challenges that exist in the region, women in all of the Arab countries, from Tunisia to Morocco to Iraq, Lebanon, Algeria, are facing all of these challenges furiously, and now they are leading the protests and the revolutions, and they are playing a very major role also in keeping them peaceful, and they are the face of change. So I think this is the main thing that I would like to.
Thank you very much, and a very, very important message. The women protesting are the face of change.
They are revoluting, actually. They are making the change.
They are making the change. Yes. So let me ask you to continue with that and answer that same difficult question. If you could change one thing tomorrow that would make a difference on this issue, what would it be?
Change one thing is really hard because it's a very complicated system and everyone needs to work together to make a change. But I think that if everyone would believe that violence against women and girls is a true violation of human rights, and it's something like our rights, we were born with these rights. We're not asking anyone to give it to us. We're just getting them back. So basically, one thing is to actually believe in these rights, and I urge the governments to act urgently, and especially all the Arab countries to sign and the ICPD commitments now. We need to ensure that happens.
Great. Recognition of women's rights. Yes. Specifically, the right not to have to fear or face violence. Terrific. Nadine.
Well, very difficult to say one thing, and we were saying if we had to make it short, we would say change men, deny the right of exert violence. I think it's very important. We're working with Spotlight, for example, on prevention. We're working in our own policy. It's very central to the national plan and to the national equality plan. So I guess what we see the change, if we can change society. Of course, women's rights are at the center, but there's this responsibility of everybody doing their part to end this situation that is taking so much of our lives, of our energy, of our resources, and really we won't get, as we know, the SDGs in place if we don't change very radically the way we behave to one another.
So, I want to ask the audience, how many people think that we would agree with Nadine's point that we need to change men? For the better.
Feminist men we need.
Yes. Henriette.
Yes.
We could do with many more feminist men like in this room. Henriette.
What is your question?
Same question.
Okay.
One thing.
Okay. We actually exchanged them and we agreed. So if I had a magic wand, I would want a 1-week sex swap between women and men. I think that would do a great deal in helping to understand each other, to be in the other person's shoes. And that would help to really dilute those stereotypes. And I think one of the big problems that we have with our social norms, that it's perceived that if we change our social norms, men would lose. But actually, men would gain. It's not a win-lose, it's a win-win. You can see it from the economic point of view, as the World Bank chief economist was pointing out. If we achieved gender equality, there would be an incredible increase in global GDP. For a country like Niger, the projections are plus 32% in GDP. That is convincing even the most conservative politician. But at the same time, it is liberating, I think, for men also not to have to conform to the standard stereotype and give them the option to be who they want to be. So I think this would be my biggest wish, and I think without boys and men to change and take this forward, we will not get there.
Thank you so much for So from changing men to exchanging shoes. But I think thank you so much also for so clearly stating what was behind the way in which the ICPD spoke about men and men's responsibilities and their roles, and the fact that the kind of change we're talking about, yes, you will have to give up. Men will have to give up on certain things. You can't beat your wife anymore, for one thing. You certainly cannot come back home from work and put your feet up and expect to be served. Those things will change, but you will also gain so much more possibility and freedom. And I wonder, Joris, if you could comment on that.
Let me combine things. Obviously, we have to look at the factors behind the violence against women. And there you go. And then you talk about combating the unequal balance between men and women, balance of power, and the division of roles, which is mentioned as well. That is a target for everybody, for me as a middle-aged white man, but above all, also for young people. And echoing what Mufida said and what Justine said, we have the largest generation of young people nowadays. Shifting the attitude among young people to give them freedom of choice to decide what they want and what their boundaries are is very important.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I think let's give our 4 speakers a big round of applause. Thank you so much. And I think we've given the audience a stimulating set of ideas to think about. Thank you so much. Go ahead. Yeah. Is the watch yours? No, somebody else's. The final segment in this session is something we might call accountability to the future. We have a group of 5 young leaders, each one of whom was born in the year that the ICPD was born, 1994. And they're going to come up and propose actions that stakeholders can take and call for commitment to those actions by +30. Let me introduce them to you. And because they are the future, the present and the future, I'm going to give slightly longer introductions than I've been doing to the previous panelists. Ms. Christine Saar Christine leads work on gender-based violence among young ambassadors, SRPF ambassadors in Senegal whom she represented at the International Conference on Family Planning in Rwanda in 2018. Christine is the women's leader of Afrian Girls in Senegal, and her passion in life is volunteer work and as a volunteer for Core Africa Senegal. She's been assigned to remote regions within her country to assist women and girls in local communities with their most urgent needs. Welcome, Christine. Gisela Foz, who's an activist and lawyer from Brazil. While studying law, she undertook a thesis entitled "The Incompatibility of the Criminalization of Abortion in Relation to the Human Rights Treaties Ratified by Brazil," which involved studying the 1994 ICPD POA held from Cairo. As a practicing lawyer, she offers pro bono services to a feminist organization located in Sao Paulo. She's also a winner of the Future Against Corruption Award, promoted by Transparency International in partnership with the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. I'm giving these longer introductions so you can see how terrific these young women are, and men, and transgenders are, that we're bringing up to this podium. Pooja Singh is the Associate Coordinator for Prava in India, working on a program that enables adolescents and youth to have agency over their own lives and bodies and change unequal norms vis-à-vis gender and other identity-based exclusions in an intersectional youth development approach. She's also a teacher facilitator for the Planet Girls program to build gender-inclusive classrooms in Delhi government schools. She's facilitated sessions on identity, patriarchy, leadership, victim blaming, and the importance of sisterhood with school-going girls for the Gender Lab. Welcome, Pooja. Not here. Oh, okay. Thank you. So each one of these young people is going to propose actions that stakeholders can take and call for commitments to those actions before any of us is 5 years older. So take it away.
So two of our 25ers here couldn't join us, and instead of that, we have another one joining us, Monica here. Monica, just quickly, if you could also give your introduction, and then we'll go on and do the call of action.
So this is an improvisation. It was a last-minute thing. But just to quickly, briefly introduce me, I am an activist for women's rights and LGBTQI+ rights in Portugal, and I work with local communities to make sure that we have funds and we continue to develop work in this field, and also that what needs to be taken up, it's going to be taken up. That's it.
When asked about what kind of world you would like to live in the next 25 years, Shubhangi, a 17-year-old girl from my country says, I would like to live in a world where girls are free to fly as high as they want to, and there are no shackles pulling them down. Shackles, she says. As already mentioned, 1 in 3 women have faced gender-based violence in their lifetime. And 58% of murders of women are committed by intimate partner violence. And these are not just numbers. These are thousands of lives at stake, including mine. And we can't be talking about women's empowerment and equal opportunity while turning a blind eye on the gender-based violence being committed against women and girls. Amongst all the types of gender-based violence, early and child marriage is the one that significantly spikes the chances of other forms of violence happening against women and girls. It snatches away the agency of the young girl to say, my body, my right, my life, I decide. And today, I'm here to call on the ministers, the presidents, lawyers, doctors, CSOs, teachers, and parents, and you and I, and all of us, to stand together, stand up, speak out, and take action to end early and child marriage and other forms of gender-based violence. And for this, I appeal to all of you that we adopt a collaborative, multi-stakeholder, psychosocial, and intersectional feminist approach. And I know that there are policies and laws and interventions and schemes, and so I also call on you to ensure that women and girls are at the center of designing, implementing, and evaluating these. Because we're not just the victims and the beneficiaries, we are the survivors and the change makers. And it's time that we get what we deserve, our right to live freely and safely in this world. Thank you.
La violence sexuelle est comme un glu qui vous colle à la peau, à l'esprit et à l'âme. Et si vous essayez toute seule de vouloir l'effacer, vous risquez de plus sombrer. Depuis des années, nous luttons contre les violences basées sur le genre. Et malheureusement, nous avons encore des violences basées sur le genre dans nos communautés. Ma question est, après les plans de lutte contre les violences basées sur le genre, quel monde est-ce que nous offrons aux victimes? Quelle prise en charge est-ce que nous donnons aux victimes? Quand je parle de prise en charge, je ne veux pas parler des questions de conseil des parents, je ne veux pas parler de l'exorcisme du prêtre, je veux parler du suivi psychiatrique. Ces victimes de violence ont besoin de suivi psychiatrique. Et ce suivi psychiatrique doit être une prise en charge de l'État. Le gouvernement doit mettre en place des structures ou être en partenariat avec ces structures pour que ces soins soient accessibles, mais aussi que des subventions soient mises en place pour que ça ne soit pas cher pour ces victimes de violence. En plus, la prise en charge ne devrait pas s'arrêter seulement sur les victimes, elle devrait être élargie. Parce qu'un homme qui voit une fille de 4 ans et qui veut la violer, cet homme n'est pas normal. Cet homme est malade. Et cet homme n'a pas seulement besoin de la prison, cet homme a besoin aussi d'être suivi à l'hôpital. Je vous remercie.
I was never really into celebrating birthdays, but then I was told I should celebrate every single day I live in my country. In Brazil, every 2 hours, a woman is killed. So it means that when we end this session, we are about to lose another life, like mine, like ours. Very often, the violence occurs within their family or an intimate relation. And 80% of the Brazilian population believes that one should never interfere into a couple's fight. The law foresees punishment, but that's not enough to tackle gender-based violence in an extremely sexist and violent society. We face gender inequality. Our rights and freedoms are not delivered to us in Brazil, in New York, and here in Kenya. Currently, our government supports the misogynist behavior and makes things even harder. Violence is really normalized. So a primary school teacher shared with me her experience in dealing with kids, mostly boys, that couldn't handle their emotions and went out by punching and kicking the other kids. We are responsible to change the social norms that jeopardize the life and future of women and girls. So I'm here to call upon us, all of us, civil society, organizations, and governments, to accelerate the end of gender-based violence through the radical change of social norms and the fall of patriarchy, so we can reach the only acceptable mark of zero harmful practices and gender-based violence, and create a world that is better, is stronger, and safer.
As you have already understood, I was not supposed to be here. So my friend Amanda, a trans woman that was supposed to be here, is currently at the hospital taking healthcare services here in Nairobi and facing discrimination. All over the world, we as LGBTQI+ people face violence, face discrimination, and we are dying, not only on the hands of others, but because sometimes the reality is so bad, people cannot take it anymore. Gender-based violence is about everyone. It's also about non-binary people, and it's also the intersectionality with sexual. Clearly, decriminalizing the existence is not enough, and it's not done what's needed. So our call to action as a community to all governments, civil society, and organizations is that we have to change the social environment. We have to have societies that are safe and inclusive for everyone, because we have the right to exist, and we have the right to decide. Thank you.
Friends, I'm not going to try and summarize what these eloquent young people have just said to us. I think that one of the things that for me has come out very clearly in this session is we often talk about gender-based violence and what gets done or not done as a gap. It's not a gap. It's a shame. And countries and governments that allow this to carry on, in fact, are allowing the continuation of something that is a shame and that needs to be changed. And that all of us, by changing norms, by transforming the nature of this beast called violence against women and girls, will in fact create a better society for all of us, and specifically for the young people represented here. So let's give them a very big hand of applause, and thank you very much for being here. The session is over. Nobody seems to want to go away. This session is now officially closed. I think you will agree it's given us a great deal of food for thought. And I hope that we can all go forward to take those ideas more deeply and with greater strength and vigor in our own work, wherever that may be. Thank you all for being here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Neil Data from the European Parliamentary Forum. The next session in this room will be the Parliamentarians Forum, starting in 5 minutes. So I would like to invite everyone who is a member of Parliament to come to the front and take their seat. If you are not here for the Parliamentarians Forum, I'd like to invite you to explore another part of the Nairobi Summit. Thank you, and I'd be grateful if you could afford us the time we need by evacuating this room in a timely manner. Thank you. Thank you. For those of you who are not here for the Parliamentarians Forum, I'd ask you to please leave the room so that we may start on time. And for those of you who are here for the Parliamentarians Forum, I'd like to invite you to take a seat, preferably up in the front. Thank you very much. Okay, final announcement. Those of you who are not here for the Parliamentarians Forum, I'd ask you to please leave and give us the courtesy of allowing us to start on time. Those of you who are here for the Parliamentarians Forum, please sit in the front rows so that we can have a more interactive dialogue. we're going to start very soon, so if I would like this is one final announcement. If everyone can take their seats, honorable members of parliament and associated persons up in the front, and anyone who is not here for the parliamentary forum, I'd like to ask you to go to leave this hall so that we may start with the parliamentary forum on time.